The next two updates are from our inspections and codes. John Hutchison, the first one is on personal care homes, and then he'll talk about short-term vacation rentals. John Hutchison.
I'll try to cut some of these slides short. A lot of them is a lot of verbiage, but we'll update you all on where we stand currently with personal care homes. Just kind of want to update everyone kind of the changes in regulation that was done already, currently by council, that was approved. Then kind of our data collection, kind of going back to see what's still existing, what's not there, what's active, what's not. And then we kind of have next steps, kind of points of discussion that I did want to talk with you all about to see if we want to, the appetite to adopt these additional regulations we may need for personal care homes. Obviously, April 10th, 2019, our biggest thing when we were with the fire department, Fire EMS is here in the house with us, is just kind of making sure our classifications all met up. We weren't quite sure, you know, we were calling them personal care homes, they were calling them group foster homes, what's this, what's that. So one of our biggest things was to create two new zoning uses, which is foster care home and group foster home, and to get rid of the zoning use for personal care home type 3, which is 15 or more. We decided to go ahead and call that institutional housing, and which already has a zoning section, and we account for that. And foster care home is for 6 or less, and then group foster is for 7 to 15. That's kind of all of that. Personal care homes, now we're designating only for adults. So if it reads personal care home type 1 or 2, it's only for adults. Foster care home, which is the new ordinance, is for 6 or more residents that is classified for juveniles, less than 18 years old. And the group foster home is from 7 to 15. So that's kind of the parameters we've done. So kind of on our use chart there, you can kind of see the first top two for personal care home and their uses and where it's allowed or special exceptions. And also for the foster home and group foster home sections where they're allowed and special exceptions allowed for those. Administratively changes, what we've done is we've sorted the, since June of this year, we've kind of gone back to sort the certificate of occupancies, because in our system it's just personal care homes. It doesn't, we don't have it specialized if it's a group foster home. It just, we either have personal care home type 1, 2, or 3. So we're going back through our data that we have to update that information slowly but surely. From any time from now on, we go ahead and put in there if it's youth or adult, and now we actually have it set up in our system where it's a drop down. So it'll say foster care home, group foster home, personal care home type 1, personal care home type 2. So now we, at the front desk, we actually ask now the permit technicians, ask the owner what type of people are being housed. Because that was the biggest question, is a lot of times we didn't know who was going into the property. We didn't know, well, we knew they were either adults or youth, but we didn't know beyond that where are they coming from. Are they coming from New Horizons? Are they coming from Child Family Services? Are they coming from DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice? We didn't know these organizations that they were coming from. So one of our biggest changes is that if the adults are under some type of addiction treatment or any substance abuse, we're moving that out of personal care homes and into transitional homes type 1s. If we get any juveniles that are being brought from juvenile justice, because the definition of a transitional housing, I'll go back, transitional housing type 2 is any individual or juvenile is any under some form of judicial or correctional control. So if we do that from here on, if we know that they're from the Department of Juvenile Justice, we know that they're under some type of judicial control, and they'll be allowed only to be in transitional housing facilities type 2. If we get anybody now, we talk to them up front, and we find out that these people are going under any type of therapy, medical care, counselor, any type of substance abuse, we will now put them only in transitional housing type 1. And so those are the uses and the zones that are allowed for transitional type 1 and type 2. So everybody's like, well, what do we do about the ones we already have out there? Yes, ma'am.
Go back to that chart.
Yes, ma'am.
So those are not allowed in single family
That's correct.
neighborhoods. Okay.
So the second part of our information was the data collection. We wanted to go back and verify which ones still existed, which ones we had that were active personal care homes, which ones we had that were active foster care homes. So we pulled everything from our InterGov permitting system. We had special enforcement officer actually go physically to these addresses to check and see if these still existed or did not exist. We got information from Columbus Fire and EMS because they already had them separated as group foster homes. So they already had the separation for us, which helped us put our efforts together. So as of right now, we have 190 current personal care homes. We have 81 that we know for sure that are active, and we have 56 that are inactive. So that leaves us about a gap of 52 or 53 that we're currently investigating to find out if they're still active or not. And that's kind of the map of where those personal care homes all across the city are currently. Second part is the group foster homes. Like I said, when we dealt with Fire and EMS, they were able to go ahead and give us the list of active and inactive they had. So we have 37 that are currently under group foster home, 32 that are active, and we have 5 that are currently inactive.
Excuse me, John. Counselor House?
Just a fast question. As you sort out who is, what kind of home is where, if they were permitted under an incorrect categorization, are you then able to
We're
get
getting
to that?
We're
Okay.
coming to that. That's kind of, and that's the breakdown of the group foster homes. So that's kind of where we come into the next steps. What we've done administratively, we've worked with the planning department because before they come and get a CO from us, they do have to come in and get a zoning verification form that they're allowed to be in that district. What we're also adding is that same verbiage I just mentioned to you all before. If they're under judicial control, they will be considered a transitional home, and if they're under substance abuse, they will be considered a transitional home type 1 or type 2, depending on the people. So we're trying to preempt that now, so when they get that zoning verification letter, that will be on that letter. So we're working with that verbiage, getting it to the city attorney to make sure that's correct. The next part is we're organizing with Columbus Fire and EMS. Typically, they're yearly foster care home inspections. So when we go out to that home, we can find out who's in that facility, who's operating in that facility, and if it's in the right, correct zone that it needs to be in. And so we also have met with the school district, and they also have talked to us about making sure that the foster care homes and group foster homes, that they're made aware of those homes and where they are, so then they know where these kids are coming from, and they can, work with DFACS and other groups to work that. These are kind of now all of our points of discussion. We wanted to see if there's potential appetite for council to add these things to the restrictions of what we already regulate and add additional regulations. So our first one there is to ask for a background check or a criminal history report. We require it for alcohol licensing, for pawn shop dealers, for taxi cabs, and even for short-term vacation rentals, but we don't have a requirement here locally that we require that for personal care homes. So we would suggest that that needs to be something that's added to the process to also stay in front of that. Also, we're kind of dealing with third-party groups. We actually had a call, Siobhan in here? When we got a call from West Georgia that apparently there was a house that was housing people from West Georgia Medical that was in a neighborhood. So we're going through the process of figuring out how did they get there, how did that process work. We're working with New Horizons to kind of clarify the groups they have and the homes they have, so we know where those people are coming from. We also were thinking of potential to treat personal care homes like we do alcohol licenses. So if we get so many citizen complaints in the neighborhood or so many complaints that we come to council and ask to revoke that license, just like we would revoke an alcohol license at a location that we were dealing with, shootings or things like that, it would be happening at a restaurant or a bar or something. So we would be interested to see if we wanted to add that as well. So if we got enough citizen complaints, because they may be okay right now, but it may be 2 years from now and they're meeting all our requirements, but there may be some issues, and if we have those documented, we can bring them to council and also present that to say, hey, can we revoke this personal care license because of X many violations within 12 months or a year or however you want to do it.
Excuse me, John. Counselor Thomas?
Ms. Hudson, when you said that we don't do background checks on the personal care and foster care homes, that sort of took me aback. I mean, these people are dealing with children in some cases, or dealing with our citizens that are not, some of them not necessarily as cognizant of what's going on as they should be. Do you know why we didn't have background checks?
The question there is the number. Like I said, DFACS performs background checks on them, but we locally do not have anything. So if DFACS or the organizations that are placing the kids do perform a background check, but we would like to add an additional a background check or a criminal history report on our end. So therefore, we're made aware if something may have slipped through them or they may have added somebody new that we don't know of. So I wouldn't say necessarily that they've never done background checks, but through our current process, there is no background check. But they may apply to the state when the children are placed or when the adults are placed. They may go through a background check at that level, but it's never transmitted to us and it's never shared with us. So we don't get that information.
And if you do, if we do authorize background checks, is this on every employee that's in that home?
Yes, anybody who's interacting just like similar to it. Like I said, we've been trying to mirror this very similar to the alcohol license. Anybody who handles alcohol that's at that bar establishment has to have a background check to get what they need to get. And we would like to have the, any employee of that business also be eligible for a background check.
I mean, I serve on the board of the Chattahoochee Council of the Boy Scouts. I had to have a background check to serve on their board. And it would seem to me that if we have people who are particularly dealing with children, you got to have a background check. You got to do that. So I commend you for let's get on with it.
Okay, got a couple of other comments here, John, if you hold on. Counselor House?
I would agree with the background checks, and your list did not include transitional care homes. Maybe it's been an oversight, but I would add that too,
Yes.
for the same reasons.
Counselor Woodson?
I just, excuse me, I agree with the background check too, but I had a question. If the states already do it, can we get a copy from it, or they would have to pay the fee and go through this process?
Yeah, that's why we weren't sure what that's why I said these are kind of discussions. We hadn't fleshed it all out. If we say, hey, we want to proceed with this, we would then communicate with those organizations to see how their process works and how, if we could acquire it without having to pay double fees, obviously at the state and local, I would be for that. We just don't know that whole process, what that is right now yet.
Okay, because I agree with it, but I just hate for a person have to get paid at the state.
Correct.
Then
And then pay, that's right.
Then us, that's like too many. Or if they can confirm that a background check
Check was
done.
performed, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
This is kind of where we're, like I said, the legal requirements I probably need some help on because kind of what Councilor House has asked before is we do this reinspection and asking for the information from who these individuals or who these juveniles or adults that are staying at these locations and asking what groups do they come from and what areas. I don't know if I have the legal standing per se to do that because they're not, I don't, that's why I said we've got to continue to investigate a lot of these things because I don't know if that's, privileged information about who, we don't want to know the exact person. We just need to know the groups that these organizations are coming from. And so if we do find somebody in there that they may have, 6 kids, but they may have 4 of them that are with DFACS. We have no problem with DFACS. But if we have 2 in there that may be from DJJ, we're like, that's the problem. But how do we distinguish, you see what I'm saying? I don't know how much information we can ask or request from these organizations to provide us so we know what that is. But that would be a part of our recheck is as we're going back is to confirm who's staying in the facility. Because a lot of times we've talked to a lot of the personal care homes when they first come in, they have to go through this whole process, chicken before the egg. They have to come through all this process for then the state to even say they're eligible to receive children. But then they don't necessarily always know where those children may be coming from. So we're kind of like, well, the only time we can recheck it, we can allow it as a personal care home to start. And then as we go back for our yearly reinspect, then we can confirm to make sure the people that are in there who's who. So that's kind of where we are on that. And then, like I said, if we were to confirm that, we give them 30 days to get them moved out of that facility, or we would have to shut it down because they would not be able to operate as a transitional housing in the facility. So that's pretty much it.
All right, Counselor Davis?
Yes, thank you, Director Hutchinson. This may have been touched on and may not. I had to take a little bathroom break, but I think I asked earlier, I talked about it was going to be explored and looked into and researched about the background checks, but I see it's in your report, which is great news, but it says that the city can require background checks. So I believe that we don't need to send that to the state, that we can do that here through a local ordinance. The Mayor, I don't know if that was discussed earlier, but I think that's a possibility now.
That's what I said, we're looking into that. I would, like I said, we continue to work with the city attorney. Like I said, that's why I kind of put all those as discussion points, because we weren't necessarily sure if council was interested in doing it. Like I
Right.
said, I'm hearing back from the background check, so we'll start to research that to see where we require
Yeah.
it. Like I said, Councilor Woodson brought up a point, if they are doing one at the state level, and then if we can get that information from them before we confirm them to operate at the local level, that'd be fine too. We just have to figure out what that process is and how we can acquire that.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening. I can tell you, not at state level. Once I get the license, everything's being done here with these type homes that you're referring to. So I'm kind of shocked that it's not happening, but certainly I think that's just common sense. It needs to happen when you're dealing with these kids. You got to match up the right people with the kids, or else you're asking for trouble.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Thomas?
I will remind you, and I know that some of the other folks in this room were in some of those meetings that we had a couple of months ago about this. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to get information out of the state. It may depend on what my mood is today when you call me, whether or not I'm going to send you that report. Sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. And so I would not want us to depend on that. That certainly could be a secondary source. But I wouldn't want us to depend on it, because we've had some problems getting information from the state, and we need to make sure that we've got what we need to carry on the business.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
All right, I'll just go to my next presentation.
Yes.
I had back-to-back, so.
Short-term rental.
All right. I'll just quickly go through the definition of a short-term rental. We've been officially past November of 18 with ordinance here locally about how to regulate them and how we would proceed to collect information and permitting process. Short-term vacation rental is an accommodation of transient guests in exchange for compensation for residential dwelling, not to exceed 30 days. Once it gets beyond 30 days, we would treat it like a lease situation. That'd be a private renter, the owner situation, and we're not getting involved in those. Like I said, single-family, multifamily types, not group living, not room and boarding houses, not personal care homes, and nothing like that. This is kind of something that's standing on its own. I want to go through the process, because ideally this is where we've had not necessarily the most trouble, but trying to understand with owners how this process works. At first, as you're coming into my department to get a short-term vacation rental permit, then you apply for your business license. We kind of go back through whatever taxes you need to pay, whether it's OC tax, exercise tax, hotel, motel fees, and then you're then considered short-term vacation rental compliant. The permit is available at our office at the Annex downtown, 10th Street. We ask for the applicant owner in 24-hour contact does get a background check, so they get a background check, a part of this process. And they have to notify us what type of house and the unit that's being rented. We need to know if it's residential, if it's a condo, accessory dwelling. Some of the older neighborhoods, you know, in Lake Bottom and other things like that, they have accessory dwellings that were existing non-conforming. Those are eligible to be rented out per the short-term vacation rentals. One of the bigger things is we ask for at least $500,000 liability insurance on the property to make sure if anything happens to anybody while they're on site. One of our biggest sticking points with a lot of our owners is that we ask for a floor plan. We need to know how this place is laid out. We don't, you know, we can say that we have every building permitted and we know exactly what construction was done in every house all over Columbus, but that's not quite realistic. But we'd like to believe that they're providing us a floor plan that is mimicking what is on the premises. And we also ask that that's posted on the premises, so in case of emergency, the person who's renting the property knows how to get out. We ask for smoke detectors to be in every bedroom and outside the sleeping areas. Like I said, a lot of the older houses didn't require that. That wasn't a requirement back in the codes then, but we do mandate that. And then if they are renting, they must have a lease from an owner approving the use as a short-term vacation rental unit. A lot of times that's where we come to another sticking point, because sometimes these owners are finding out via Airbnb that their houses are being rented out to someone else. And, we're like, well, what, we don't control the Airbnb side or the Vrbo or whoever. We don't control that side for them to take it off. But a lot of these owners are like, well, what can you do? And unfortunately, we don't have the listing power is what that is, because they can post it online, and they weren't the original listing agent. This renter was. So that's a whole nother kind of civil issue that they're trying to clarify. But with us, we at least ask them for the beginning, if they're renting it, that they make sure it's specifically spelled out in the lease that they are allowing them for this use for a short-term vacation rental unit. If we don't see that in the lease, we don't accept it.
Can I ask you a question? Let's say it's not in the lease because they rented the property, let's say 2 years ago, and they decided to, what do you require them?
We make them
Something
get
back?
us a new lease.
Get a new lease?
Like if we do not see short-term vacation rental in the lease, we do not accept it. We make sure, because, they've been living there 3, 4, 5 years, but then they come back and they want to all of a sudden become a short-term vacation rental unit. We want to make sure that owner is aware that that's their intended use with that property. So if they bring us a lease, we make sure that if it does not say our permit text, if it doesn't say short-term vacation rental on it, we don't accept it.
Okay. Thank you.
I've got Yvonne here on the business license side in case I stumble over too much of this. But once they get to us and they get the permit approved through our department, then they have to go to get a business license for a short-term vacation rental unit. The $75 administration fee for the business license, obviously business license and our permit also expire on a yearly basis, so they have to come in and renew. All short-term vacation rentals located in the city of Columbus are subject to obtaining a business license, OCTAX certificate, paying occupation taxes, and hotel, motel, lodging, exercise taxes. So that's kind of what the form looks like when you get from revenue. The occupation tax is imposed upon the gross receipts and due April 1, just similar to any business license issue that we're dealing with. The short-term vacation rentals operating prior to November 18th are responsible for paying back to that. And that's one of the issues we get with is they come see me and they're like, hey, I'm almost ready to be a short-term vacation rental. But if they've been operating since November 18, they go see Yvonne and they owe all these taxes. A lot of them are like, I need to get the money together or try to do what I need to do to repay all that money before they become compliant.
Councilor Thomas?
Mr. Henderson, I need to go back to the permit page. Does the fire department inspect these yearly?
No, we don't. Like I said, what we've done to kind of quell personnel issues and having us all trying to stay in front of these, we make them sign an affidavit. So they have to bring all this information to us. The owner. That's correct, or whoever's renting out the company. So we make that affidavit. Now, if we get a complaint from whoever's rented the property to say, hey, I don't have a smoke detector and we don't have fire extinguishers, we go out there and we say, hey, you signed this attestament telling us that you did, we can revoke their license. So that's kind of how we're doing it at this point. Like I said, we've been working with the fire department. That's why we kind of added those, affidavit items in there for them to approve those things, so we could make sure we stay on top of it.
I was just trying to get in my mind the process for making sure they have the floor plan posted and making sure they have the smoke detectors and that sort of thing. And if the department was inspecting them on a yearly basis or whatever, as they do other businesses, that would be part of it, I would assume, but.
Correct.
We don't inspect them yearly?
As of right now, like I said, this is honestly, next month will be a whole year that we've actually had an ordinance together. So we're kind of trying to see how many we have, where they are, and trying to then at that point, if we need to, go a step further, we can. So right now, we're just trying to, more or less right now, our biggest thing is collecting everybody who is claiming to be one online and to be able to get them into compliance. And at that point, then we can decide if we need to continue with further inspections.
Is there ever a problem, a legal problem with if the fire department wants to go in and check your bed and breakfast, can they do that?
I don't see why not.
It's probably the city attorney to answer.
So,
Yeah, unless there's some reason they would be involved with the police and need some kind of a warrant, they can certainly request
Yeah.
to go in.
so.
I mean, I know that our department is working as hard as they can in all of the areas that they can. But it would seem that there may be some of these that we know are problematic, that we may want to have somebody other than, problematic in these kinds of areas. But I don't know if the department can.
Yeah, I know the fire marshal has some authority to look at any person running a business, but as far as an actual search of premises, you get into something else, but fire
Well,
marshal.
they do have to have a business license, right?
That's correct.
Right.
So does that give them,
Well,
give the fire
fire
marshal the
marshal-
That would
authority
give
to
us,
go
I
in?
mean, yes.
Right, he ought to be able to just knock on the door and say, I need to just check the premises.
Yeah, so we have the ability. It's just at this point, we're trying, like I said, we're trying to corral how many we have, the number, who's active, who's inactive, and then we can take further action if we need to do spot checks. I'll kind of explain once we get to kind of our enforcement sections.
And I know
of some
that
of
probably,
what we're doing.
99% of our bed and breakfast folks are doing the right thing. But
Now, we've got
Now,
here,
like our
now, I want to make
business
sure,
thing,
bed and breakfast is a whole separate
I mean.
group. The short-term vacation rental, I don't want to get that confused. That's
Short-term
their.
vacation rental, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, use the wrong terminology. Thank you.
All right, so, business license, so like I mentioned, that's one of the issues, is once they come and get a permit from me and pay the money and pay their, background check, potentially going over to revenue and having to pay the OC taxes that have been due since November 18th, if they've been in operation for months, is a concern too. That's right, that's right. So
Can I
once-
ask you a question? Let's say you revoke it, the business license, is there a time frame for them to come back and renew it, or it's just?
I believe per the
suspended?
ordinance, it's a year. Like if
It's
it
a
is
year.
revoked, they cannot come back and reapply for a year.
They have to wait a year
That's
from
correct.
the year of the
From
violation?
the year, that is correct.
Okay. You back, Mayor?
Once again, excise tax also has to be paid. 8% lodging occupancy is imposed on the rentals. Short-term vacation rentals operating prior to November 18th are responsible for filing from November 18th to the current reporting period. This is our implementation schedule so far. October 10th, that's when council approved the rental ordinance to go into effect. January 1, we finalized our report, our permitting, and kind of our process internally as to how to marshal everyone through the process. We got, from March 18th, we got the first list from the Visitors Bureau from the STR Helper Report, which started to tell us who the non-compliant listings were so we could start proceeding with them. April 2019, we sent notification letters out to the over 150 properties that were in non-compliance. At that point, they got a list. They were sent a letter to not the physical house, because a lot of times the house may only be a unit or the owner that's providing service. But we sent it to the mailing address that was listed online. They got a copy of a letter from us and the process. So they got a copy of the permit, business license, background check, all the information they needed to do to fill out and become code compliant. In June, we ended up going back again once we still had lists that were in non-compliance and started to issue citations. We had about 8 that we were able to actually count on premises, and we gave them to the fourth, actually I think it ended up being the first week of July to come into compliance, and those 8 did. And then as of right now, the little door hanger that's up there with you all, this month, we'll be putting these on the physical doors of these properties that are in non-compliance. Still, once again, let them know, once again, they're in non-compliance. A lot of these people are running businesses. So ideally, when they're coming, you say you've got somebody who takes care of the grass, or you've got a maid that comes in and flips the beds, or you've got the person that comes in and washes everything that's in the building before that next group comes in. Hopefully, this might get their attention to let their owner know, hey, they need to come in and get to compliance, because if it's in the mailbox, they don't see that kind of stuff. If we come by and nobody's there, we don't see anything. So hopefully, this door hanger will help get some more of these people into compliance, because these people that do come and maintenance the facilities and maintenance the houses may be able to get that information.
Councilor Woodson?
Yes, I had a question for you, just because I recall hearing the bread and breakfast, and then we have the vacation homes now. How do you categorize a person renting a room? Because I've seen where I'm driving and I've seen for rent a room. How do you control that?
Well, ideally, when we're getting into that, like I said, if we see for rent signs, typically we call and ask. 'Cause we can say we're someone else and we just say, hello, you've got a place for rent. And
Yes.
how many days are you selling this? How many days are you operating for? And if they tell us it's 30 days or more, if they're trying to look for a full-term lease or a 12 months lease or 18 months lease, that's a private entity and we don't get into those.
Okay.
If they tell us that, yeah, we're using it for Airbnb, then we come by and see them. Those are the easiest ones to get because they're only renting a room, so we can go get them because the person's on site. A lot of these they're renting the whole house, so there's not anybody there physically that's there during the day or we can get a hold of. So that's what we do if we see them out for rent.
Okay, but our requirement, if they're not there, there's someone within 24 hours reachable, correct?
That's correct, but if they haven't yet come to get registered, we don't know who that is.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so kind of in the enforcement process, we're working with the Visitors Bureau, and they provide us the information with the STR helper, and then we also confirm with the Revenue Division to make sure that we have they made it all the way through the process. Kind of this is our track from May, when we started to get them separated kind of between compliant, new, and non-compliant. And right now, as of September 30th, we have 180 total. We have 111 that are in non-compliance. We have 55 that are permitted, which means they made it through my office and quite not finished to revenue. And then we have 29, I think 30. We had somebody come in last week, didn't they? Yeah, so we have somebody, we right at 30 for actual compliant. So we're going through the processes, and like I said, we have the ones, the list that is non-compliant. We're going through those. Those are the ones that'll get these yellow hangers this month. We'll go back through my group, property maintenance inspectors, go through quarterly to go through and check these properties and physically go to each one of the addresses to make sure they're in compliance. Kind of our enforcement issues is we went through the list of all the properties, the mailing addresses, and out of that 180, 32 of those are from out of town. So there's nobody physically here because they have yet to get registered. We don't have that 24-hour contact. We don't have that, we don't have that information on them yet. We just know that they're not physically here. And like I said, that's why we thought about doing the hangers, because if they're operating a business and they are flipping these houses and getting ready for the next person to come in, maybe they'll see this and give us a call because they're not checking the mailbox and that mail is not coming to that address. And once again, many of the owners are operating whole house. So if we go by there, regardless of what time we're going by, nobody's there. We've had a few occasions where we actually got some choice words from the owners because we startled the renters, because the renters were there. We were like, well, we don't know the difference. Here you go. Because we're like, listen, we need y'all to get in compliance, and we need to get you, somebody's actually here, so we're going to talk to you and find out what's going on. So we've had a few owners not too happy with us, but we're just letting them know that they're not in compliance and they need to come and get into compliance. And kind of how I mentioned earlier, the past due money owed to revenue. So they may come to me and get everything through codes, but if they go to revenue and they still owe OC tax or excise tax or hotel motel tax, however many months they've been operating, we prefer you to do it from the start so you wouldn't know it's anything. You just come in and you pay that $75 and you're ready to go because you haven't started to operate a business. But the people who are operating, they have to make sure they meet all those requirements, and we're recouping the funds since November of 18. So, like I said, I mentioned the hangar, and that's what we're doing this month. Permit renewal, so once again, we're getting to that point because this is a yearly renewal process. So between business license and my department, they will have to come in and get renewed. We're working on getting that renewal package out here next month, so we'll have that out, and we'll go from there.
Councilor House?
How much time do they have to become compliant?
Typically, if we get a hold of you, we'll
Yeah.
see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So at that point, because we know you've been operating the business,
Okay.
and, at that point, we're just saying, hey, next available court date, and that's the time we get them to come.
Okay, and the plan then is if they don't pay or whatever?
That's right. If they come in at that
pull away?
point, we take care of that, and
Okay.
then we move on.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't appear to be more questions. Good updates, though.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my agenda.